Here we go. Beautiful day. Subconscious breathers, infinite beings alike. We're waiting for Lance to hop on. Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing today? Waiting for Lance to hop on. He's going to talk about growing up in a conscious community. It's going to be powerful. Nikolai, how are you feeling after our session, Nikolai? Hope all is well, brother. Nikolai is in Norway, and we did some flame breathing. Really got him heated up. Beautiful, Nikolai. Beautiful. Beautiful. Waiting for Lance. I think I can just invite him here. Let's see. Lance. I was intrigued. Lance is part of the Alchemy Breathwork community. He's in the members group. I've never actually done a one-on-one with him, so I'm really intrigued on his story. Hey, what's going on? Elevation versus existence. How are you? I'm waiting for Lance to hop on. Send him a request. It's a beautiful day, man. The sun is finally coming out to play over here. There he is. All right, popping him on. Lance.
Devon, what's up, brother?
Hello, brother. How are you?
Enjoying my own beautiful day here as well.
Chasing the sun, or this? We're just following the sun, really. I don't like to say chasing.
Right.
Following the sun.
Becoming aware of it, it's always there.
Exactly. Even in the darkest hours, the sun is still shining somewhere, right?
That's right.
The sun is still up. So I saw your post on growing up in a quote-unquote conscious community. I would love to hear more about that. We have never done a one-on-one. I know you're in the members group, and yeah, I would love to know more.
For sure.
Your journey as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Glad it caught your attention. It's definitely quite a story, and yeah, happy to share. Um, so yeah, I grew up in a community. It's called the Summit Lighthouse, and it's a branch of Theosophy, if you're familiar, which is a spiritual movement that was kind of founded out of other movements, but it began in the early 1900s. And I'd say, to like distill it down, their beliefs were to search the world's religions and different philosophies and try to find the common core truth in them. And so it encompassed a lot of things. It was pretty all inclusive as far as the different religions that they went into. A lot of Christian influences, but also Hindu, into Hindu, Buddhism, Islam, all of it. So a very vast belief system. And so that was called the Theosophic movement, and that began in the early 1900s. And this particular community began on the East Coast in the 50s, and it was a husband and wife who founded it, and their last name was actually Prophet, Mark and Elizabeth Prophet. And it wasn't changed. I had that question. I was like, was their last name really Prophet? It was. And they began channeling. So they eventually began channeling ascended masters. And so it became very influenced by those messages they were bringing through. and they moved it from the East Coast to California in, it was probably the 70s, and they had a beautiful ranch in Malibu, and that's where my parents met, in this community. And it was a full-on spiritual community where people were living there on the land, had different jobs within the community,
Mm.
and it was very focused just on spreading the teachings, as they call them, spreading the word of the channelings they were bringing through. And yeah, so they met there, and then the husband passed away, and the wife, she was the sole leader at that point. She moved it to Montana, so they bought a huge ranch in rural Montana outside of Yellowstone Park, thousands of acres, beautiful nature, and they moved there to kind of get away from civilization, get away from Los Angeles. They were getting a lot of scrutiny, just being a spiritual community, around the same time that all these cults all over the world
Oh
were
yeah.
getting a lot of attention and being scrutinized for what they believe and what was going on. So they moved out to the middle of nowhere in Montana, and that's where I was born. I was born into the community. At the time, there were over 1,000 people living on the community, and there was a lot going on. We had crops, animals, farmland, timberland, and it was this whole operation. And at the same time, they were pumping out books, pumping out audios. I guess they were cassette tapes back then. And yeah, so grew up in this setting in a very communal environment, where mostly growing our own food, very isolated from the outside world. We didn't really interact with much of the outside world. I didn't watch much TV or listen to the radio, anything like that. And um, yeah, there's a lot of aspects of it. It's very health conscious. So that was one of the main things that I've taken away and benefited from is basically from birth, they were already talking about things like veganism, talking about macrobiotic diets. They went through a lot of different phases of how they were eating and the different practices they were doing. But it was always just, regardless of what the phase was at the time within the community, I was just brought up amongst all these different ideas. Yoga was very prevalent, chakras, breath work. Even there were people there into breath work, a lot of chanting, and so it was great to be raised in that, with that focus on being healthy. There was a Montessori schooling system that I was raised in, so it was very progressive in that way, as far as finding the best ways to raise kids and to take care of your health.
One of the best environments you could yeah, you could really honestly be in.
Yeah,
It's a safe environment in terms of mindset, which is the foundation of growing up in a world like this that we live in. So
absolutely.
I definitely want to ask you, if you didn't, and you probably get this a lot too, if you didn't have grown into that society, how how different you think your life would be in the terms of how society in the outside world versus the community have an influence on your way of thinking and stress and things of that nature. How do you think it'd be different?
Yeah, it would be very different for sure. Um, so there, I mean, there was a lot of. I just went through some of like the more positive aspects of the community. There was also a lot of challenges that were brought up by the way I was raised, mostly having to do with the isolation, the feelings of being separate. There was a strong sense of like us being the bearers of the truth versus the outside world that doesn't know what they're doing. And with that, there was a lot of fear. It was just a very clear divide of we know what's right, they don't, and their level of consciousness is lesser, so we shouldn't engage, we shouldn't interact with them, we shouldn't try to understand or tune into what they're doing or what's going on out there. So there were some challenging aspects like that later on in life I had to repattern and just kind of dive deeper into and decide, do I truly believe this, or is this something I just was programmed with early on?
Mm.
Um, but as far as how it'd be different had I not been raised there, I think it put me on a very rapid path to spiritual evolution, essentially. It
Yeah.
was, I mean, when you're 3, 4 years old and you're already hearing where people talking about consciousness and different dimensions and entities and your chakra system and all these things, that really just became my operating system. And so from that, from childhood, that's just how I think about the world. Like I see everything as energy. And for the longest time, and that was normal to talk about things in that way on the community. And then when we left, for a long time, we left when I was 12 and starting middle school. And so I'm going around seeing the world as energy and spiritual beings. Everyone's a unique spiritual being, a divine, divine creation. And kids are talking about their latest movie or whatever, and it was very hard to connect with people when we left because I was thinking in a different way. And so had I not grown up there, I certainly wouldn't be as interested in spiritual things as you could say just aware of those aspects of life as I would have been otherwise, or I am. So that's probably the biggest thing. Like anything spiritual, anything esoteric, mystical, from a young age, like I'm immediately drawn to it. It's like this. It just feels like a natural topic. It's something that I grew up talking about, learning about, hearing about. So I guess you could call it a spiritual curiosity,
Ah,
which
okay. Yeah.
which in the post that you read and caught your attention, that curiosity can go to, I mean, it can be a good thing, but can also turn into seeking and not being very present, not being accepting of what is, which is what I found myself doing. I grew up in this spiritual community and they're all very much seekers, trying to find the truth,
Uh,
exploring, reading, learning constantly. And it's like that can be taken to an extreme. And I think it does very often in the sort of communities that we're in is people, let's say you have a spiritual awakening and you start learning about all these things you've never heard of before, and all of a sudden you're just seeking, you're just trying to gather more information. It's like, oh, I didn't know about that, I didn't know about that, I don't, what's this over here, what are you talking about over here? And it just becomes a grab of information versus what's relevant to me right now, what's going to keep me feeling whole and good and safe in my body, which we have a lot in common with that, where for us, that's breath work. It's the breath. It's like that is the preferred technique, tool to keep ourselves centered, and everything then stems from that versus like seeking outwardly for that feeling.
right. And you know, what really propelled me into diving deeper into the breath was it was it was the act of doing rather than the act of talking, in that
Mm,
sense, because I grew up in a more of a Catholic sense, and that's all that's all they would be doing. The preacher would be there and everyone's like gazing at the preacher. Okay, and what else are we doing? And I could feel a shift going into like gospel churches where
mm,
they would sing, in
right.
that in a form is in a way is chanting in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, and I could feel the energy difference versus someone just talking, and someone all the crowd is just listening. But when you're singing all at once, you know, there's an energy presence there. And I feel like at that point in my life, that's when my aha moment planted little seeds, and that's when I started doing magic tricks, created my own. I literally have like 350 magic tricks that I created in my little notebook. It's still home in that bookshelf
Amazing.
right there. But going back to your story, what's beautiful about your story too is um, even even in a sense, even in the quote unquote conscious community, if you will, just seeing both that side and going into the schooling system like you did, I feel like you had you tell me if I'm wrong or not, but do you think this helped you in the sense of knowing how to think instead of forcing yourself into what to think? And I had that. That was a huge push when I went into private school, shifting into public school because
Mm-hmm.
the public school system were pushed onto you in terms of what to think instead of how to think, like the private schools. And the
Mm-hmm.
private schools I went to was one of the biggest proponents in the African American community. It's called the Chat School,
Oh, yeah.
and some people from the civil rights community helped build that school, like Malcolm X's family, Martin Luther King's family, and their biggest proponents and foundation was um, really expressing your artistic soul. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I went into public school, I didn't find myself singing as much as I did in private school, so I could see the great divide there in terms of creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you took it that way because that's been a major theme in my life is my journey has just been, and I think everyone is this way. It's like the journey from, you could say, just the restrictive, like the tension of the conditioning that's put on you that you learn through schooling, through society, through your parents, through family, however it comes, and the gradual releasing of that tension, like breathing into it and allowing yourself to move past those things that you've learned, those things that are blocking you, that are mental, that have become then trapped in the body, and allowing yourself to just like fully open up and then creatively express yourself. It's like like what would you do if there were no restrictions on what you could do? You just be yourself and you would be inspired as children are to just create and play. I saw someone said that in the comments, become like a child. That's I guess the Bible verse about it. But it's like that is basically the key thing that I learned growing up. It's like being in Montessori school or and there's other schools like the school you mentioned, these private schools or Waldorf schooling where it's like, okay, a child that's just has no boundaries or no restrictions placed on how they're going to express themselves, rather than teaching them the way that we've been doing things, the way that they should do things. Let's see what they do. Let's see what they can create. Let's see what new creativity and energy they can pull through being unconditioned as they are and allowing them to express that. So it's like we would literally go to school and there were set things to do where, hey, this is your lesson, this is we're gonna learn our numbers over here, we're gonna learn to write over here. But a lot of the time it was just like, here's all this stuff, and it would be toys and tools and anything you wanted, and it's like go explore. And to me, that feeling has stuck with me. And it got buried for a little bit in high school and middle school when you start getting the conditioning and we moved out of the community and I'm seeing what other kids are doing and I just want to be cool. So I do what they do. But that feeling always stuck with me and I feel like I'm
Oh, okay.
some called me. Um, I feel like I've been rediscovering it the last few years, especially uh, it's been ramped up quite a bit with the breath work. Like when I've started to focus on breath work, and that became a source of curiosity and like wonder and play for me. As you know, the breath just brings awareness to everything. So now it's like I'm curious about everything, and that's just kind of my natural state. And a lot of people tell me like you're very, very like childlike in the way that your mannerisms are, the way that you express, and it's just because I have this curiosity that I'm allowing myself to express more and more. Where it's like I could literally talk to anyone about anything, and
Yeah.
it's all and the conversation's always going to come back to something like this, like the being present, being with the breath, being like a child, being curious, all these sorts of things. And someone just said prana is everything. Yeah, so I mean, you no matter what you're talking about, it always ends up coming back to energy and like how are you being in that energy, what are you creating, what are you choosing in this moment.
Yeah, and being in that less density I see you fast too. So
Mm,
being in that less density for this long, it has really inspired me to be more childlike. Like uh, like playing around, working out. I didn't even look at it as a workout in terms of whatever I do, like the monkey bars and things of that nature. I look at it literally as play. It's
yeah.
play. It's not like I'm forcing myself to do anything. It's just a deep inner part of me, still growing in mass. I told myself, like, why not, try different things and play around with it, and I'm not even in the mindset of let me see how big I can grow. It's more like I'm playing for the day. I'll do this for the day. I'll do that for the day, you know, and that's going back to the play. That's one of the foundations of how I built alchemy the way I did, to utilize different breathing mechanisms where it doesn't feel mundane, where it feels a lot of fun,
Hmm.
and you can play around with the breath in so many ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that about you, and I love that. And I've noticed that since being in your breathwork group, it's like the all these things you've created, like you've created all these different techniques. They weren't things that you went and learned from someone else. It's like you created your own modality or your own style of breathwork based on things that you're curious about. Tesla, 369, all these different things and things that you've experienced and learned. And to me, that is our natural state. It's just like we're all out here taking in information, and then it's almost like remixing music. It's like we're out here taking in information, and then based on that, we've got like all these ingredients, and it's like, okay, what do I want to make? What unique expression of me am I going to bring forth and share with others so they can benefit from and so they can play in the same way that I am. I love that.
I call it breath art.
Yeah,
Literally breath art.
I love it. It reminds me, this is kind of related, but there's some quote I saw, and I've heard it before, but I just read it this morning, and it really struck me, and I know you'll like it. But it's like, and you've probably seen it, but it's if painting is how we decorate space, then music is how we decorate time.
Hmm.
And that I really love that quote. Every time I see it, it's just like I can get down with that because to me, music, especially since learning breath work and getting really into it, like just breathing and listening to music with my eyes closed is such a blissful experience, and like something that I could do for hours, and I do, where it's just like find some really good music. And you and I have similar music tastes. I always love when you share something with music in the background because it'll be some song that I've heard or something that I haven't heard. I'm like, I like this too, and Devon knows what's up. Um, but yeah, just allowing yourself to listen and breathe and feel, and especially when you can get the mind involved and you're just visualizing things and seeing things like that's what you do as a child, right? It's just fun, so enjoyable, and you don't need anything else.
Did you get a chance to play the breath work to sleep?
I have, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I really love that one.
Yeah, I haven't I've heard like two people try it out with breathwork. They really feel it, but it's mainly for sleep. But I'm really curious if you tried doing breathwork to it at all.
Yeah, I did. It was in the afternoon, kind of as like a nap, and I was just like, I'm gonna try to use it because generally when it's time for me to sleep, I don't know how it is for you, but like whenever I feel like my energy levels, especially when fasting or eating lighter, like my energy levels are so high the entire day, all the way until it's time for bed. Like I can be doing something like thinking, moving, all this stuff, and then it's time for bed. Like the moment I decide it's time for bed, I'm asleep within 30 seconds. So it's like it's just like that conscious choice. It just happens. So I've never had to use anything really to fall asleep.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'll do this in the afternoon, just kind of as a nap. And I would say, I'm not sure if I completely fell asleep, but I definitely got into a very like low theta, very meditative space using it.
Yeah, I look at sleep as unconscious breath work. So why not bring in some positive feedback into it and integrate it into your subliminals? You're hearing the breath in the background
Hmm.
with the other music. Um, I'm going to put together the event that I had with like 40 plus people, the surround
Yeah.
walls. I'm gonna cut audio from that and put that into the next one, because
Mm,
listening to it again, I could really feel it. I was like, wow, and the resonance that all the bowls were having all at once was just so on
amazing.
point. It was amazing, and how it all came together. It wasn't. It's like nothing really came to the exact plan. Everything was improvised last minute, unfortunately. But no, fortunately, actually, because that's when everything really meshed together and even pushed me more into the leadership role of how I would run it. So it was a beautiful thing, indeed.
Amazing how that works sometimes when, often, I would say almost every time when you just allow it to flow and things to fall into place and synchronize, it works out better.
Mm. So can you say the same thing in terms of all that you learned and going into the public system. I guess we could put it like that. You're going from
Hmm.
literally privatized to the public domain, the public system in that sense. And were there any instances, because you brought up, being in the public school, you can see how the kids that you grow up with are a lot different than the private school kids or
Hmm.
the community kids that you grew up with. Uh, were there any like clear cut difference that you could like feel, and some part of you are saying like, "Oh man, I really can't believe it's like that out here." you know,
Yeah,
you can dive into that.
for sure. I'd say the biggest the things that were most noticeable were kind of what we were discussing, where it's like the self-expression and creativity. Whereas growing up in the community, that was very encouraged in school, especially. It's just like create, like what do you want to do? What do you want to create? What are you excited about? Versus being in public school. So I started public school at sixth grade. So it was the start of middle school, and it's very structured, and you've got your different classes, different periods, and um, everyone's doing some things a certain way. And coming into that as a child who was used to just being really expressive, being in a nice big open classroom where everyone's just doing what they love, to being and sitting at a desk and learning and having the bell ring and all these sorts of things. It was, I remember initially I got in trouble a lot for speaking out of turn. It's like I wanted to share my ideas. I wanted to share my opinion about things, and actually was like found myself in detention quite a bit because I would just speak out of turn. Like the teacher was saying something, and I would just start asking a question, or someone else was talking about something, and I'd jump in and want to say something too. And so that was, I remember a lot of that, and that having that be shut down, and especially being punished for that, getting detention for that, very quickly became clear, like, okay, this is different, I can't do that. And was a really a depressive thing. Like I started withdrawing, becoming more inwards, not expressing myself, choosing not to
Mm.
speak my mind because it was being met with that response. And so as middle school, and really it got pretty dark during high school, like I became very withdrawn, very inward, depressed, you could say, because I wasn't expressing. So I chose not to express. And by the time high school came around, like there were days when I wouldn't speak to anyone. I just wouldn't say a word the entire day because I'd become so withdrawn from my natural self. And I thought there's a lot of things built on top of that, but there was a lot of fear also, fear that I developed of people finding out where grown up, because it had become very clear that I was different. Things were done differently here. And I didn't want anyone to know where I'd grown up. I didn't want them to know that I'd been grown up in a spiritual community. I didn't want them to know that I thought a certain way or saw things a certain way. So I would pretend to to just be different, to think differently. And a lot of times that just led to me not speaking because it was a lot easier to just be quiet versus try to figure out how to communicate something in a way that wasn't really who I was.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, that's probably the self-expression piece of it is probably the most noticeable thing.
Hmm. I was drawn to always speak with the older kids in when it came to high school
Hmm.
because I don't know, I always thought a different way, and when I would hang around my peers, it they couldn't relate to my mindset, that the way I was thinking.
Hmm.
And when I hear the older kids speak and whatever they're talking about, I'm like, oh, I like that topic. I resonate with more of a mature resonance, if you will, in that sense. And you know, that was one of the biggest things that private school gave me, because they pushed you to think um, a certain demeanor in terms of why. Always acts like why the big why, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And that's what really helped me mature a lot faster than my peers growing up.
Hmm.
So I definitely resonated with that. And yeah, I broke some rules too in terms of going out with the older kids during lunch and when I wasn't supposed to. So I
Definitely.
definitely, I definitely, I definitely agree with that in terms of breaking the system that it's supposed to be, but it still doesn't make any sense in terms of how they push it onto people.
Hmm. Yeah. I was just thinking of, I'm glad that you went that route and we're interacting with older kids versus my route of just not talking to anyone.
Mm.
Probably more more helpful. But I was thinking about like that me in that state during those times, like being in high school, and it is especially as it relates to the body and the breathing in particular. It's like I went from being self-expressed, being expressive, creative, and which I assume I can't remember how I breathed at the time, but I assume it was a very natural, like open breathing. And I was allowing myself to take full deep breaths and be present versus when you become like inwardly withdrawn. And I was very cautious. My mom described me as being like mousy. It was like I was very careful about what I said or what I did because I didn't want anyone to, I just basically didn't want to engage with anyone. I just wanted to keep to myself and like take up as little space as possible. So it's like from a body standpoint, it's like that's a like a contraction and not taking as full breaths, like not being okay with what is, being afraid, being hesitant, very a lot of anxiety, the mind's running. And so I was just reflecting on that, like the closed offness, and then how now I have such a big emphasis on breathing deeply and opening up the body and how it all relates to how you're feeling mentally, especially. Um, just reflecting on that. There was one
Well,
thing I want. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say quickly, you can literally look at the desks that they put us into public school and how
Yeah.
that constricts the breathing. So
Hmm.
there it is in hindsight.
Yep. Hunched over, doing your work.
Yep.
Absolutely. That makes me think of like what would be there's like a picture in my mind forming of like the optimal, like let's say it's a classroom and this is like a school that we're designing, and it's like what would be the optimal classroom space. And like the one growing up that we had, it was a huge open room, and there were different stations, like places and desks and things to do the different things, but it was very much like an open space and you could see people on the other end doing something else different than you, and you're over here doing your thing, coloring, whatever it is. So it's like what would be an optimal classroom setting? And I know there's like outdoor schools
Oh yeah,
and
right.
things like that, but what in your mind, like what would be some of the components of like an optimal school for,
If
let's say
if
this
it's
is like kids under 10.
under 10, if it's indoors, um, I would say beanbags.
Yeah.
Beanbags, so they can sit in lotus, but they don't have to sit in lotus. They can still be they're not restricted in terms of their movement and how they feel, and it also puts their brain in terms of in a balanced state where they have to, all right, I got to sit a certain way when I'm writing this, I got to be a certain way, but there's more flexibility there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at like those Google offices where they have different spaces, but you don't see like a constricted seat, because I think they know they want their workers to be at an optimal state, because Google takes mental health, and I think many people should start um, looking at one of the biggest company, those big companies, in terms of um, uh, doing utilizing mental health as uh, a foundational route in terms of how they do things. Because if your workers or your coworkers or people that you're building with is not at a mental
For sure.
um, at a mental level, at an optimal level in the mental space, how are they going to perform at their best?
For sure. Yeah. I used to work in San Francisco for some tech companies, and I would think about that all the time. It's like, how is that not the most important thing? It's like, if you're going to pay people this much money to work for you, it's like you want to make sure that they're thinking clearly, that they're feeling good, that they're able to do their best work, they're able to be creative. And it's just something that the vast majority of companies don't think of. And the companies like Google started making it more of a priority, and it started spreading. But at least at the companies I worked at, it was almost shocking. And it's especially when it comes to food, and that's like a whole topic in itself. But it's like
Mm.
they let's have a company meal, and it's just pizza, and everyone has pizza, and then for the next that you let's say everyone has pizza at noon, and then for the next 3 hours everyone is like half asleep, basically doing nothing. And it's like, I know you're wanting to celebrate everyone, but and like make them feel good by getting them pizza, but what really happened is now nothing's happening the rest of the day. No work is being done. And then after work, well, let's all go get beer together. Everyone poisons themselves, and it's like there's just not that much thought put into it. So it's it's exciting to think of, the same way it's exciting to think of different ways of setting up a classroom or for kids to learn. It's like exciting to think about companies, and everything's changing so much now with people working remotely and the
Right.
internet and all this stuff. So there may not be that many like large group office type companies, but it's exciting to think about the fact that there are companies that are moving more towards that, where it's like, let's make the health of our employees, the health of the people here working together, growing together, creating together, the number one priority. And then everything else flows from that. And it's like your business success or the success of whatever project you're working on is going to be that much better because everyone is feeling good. Everyone is like in a coherent, clear state.
Exactly. I worked with this one company, and I asked, "Oh, what's your food time? When do people commune?" Oh, they're like 11 a.m. I'm like, 11 a.m.? That's still pretty early.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like I was pushing veganism or anything like that. I did stress how it's important to be more plant based, at least during work, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed the science behind that. And at least they pushed when they commune to eat towards the end
Mm-hmm.
versus during work. And we literally saw the workload and work productivity go way through the roof because people are on that fasted state. People are also doing the guided breath work that I did. And it was literally like they were taking the limitless pill, but in a work setting, I guess. But
Yeah.
that's what the breath really is. It's really a limitless pill. It's limitless.
Yeah. You can do everything. It is everything. I love that. One thing I wanted to touch on with you, and I just noticed you had the tensor ring up in your
Oh
headband.
yeah, I was censoring. Yeah.
Awesome. I was thinking about this yesterday, and this is a big part of what I talk about and share about with people is like the fact that everything is here and now, and there is nothing else. And the one metaphor, like image for it, I like to think of is Shiva dancing. And Shiva, there's all these images, and the Hindu
Right.
tradition of Shiva dancing on the world, and he's the creator and the destroyer. So, to me, and I learned about that growing up. That was part of our. It was just like hearing a Bible story. It's like we would hear the stories of the Hindu stories of the different gods and all these things. And so that always stuck with me as this image of Shiva dancing. And with every swing of his leg, he's creating and destroying the world. And so like that's literally what's happening is, and I know you're into Bashar as well for a while, but Bashar talks about like every second, it's like 52,000 or something times per second the world is being created and destroyed. So it's just like a blinking. It's just like, or like a film strip, and
Right.
every new frame is a new version of everything. And so the way that you can shift to a new version of your reality is by choosing a different film strip. And it's like, so it's like you're in this frame, and there are infinite frames, and they can be vast differences between them, or there can be not that vast differences. It can be literally the same thing. So it's like by tuning in, being present, and realizing that's happening, that the dance of Shiva is happening, everything's being created and destroyed. You can decide at any moment to shift your state, and that will tune you to the next film strip that is more reflective of the state you want to be in, or the world you want to be in.
Hmm. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, brother, thank you for coming on. Let me see the time. Yeah, I'm about that. I'm about done here in the time limit. So
Very good.
yeah, thank you for coming on, brother, and you're always welcome. Maybe we can do this another time again for sure. And
Absolutely.
thank you all for sharing the breath.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Devon. Pleasure, my friends. See you
Peace.
in another version of the now.
There it is.
What's going on, you beautiful beings? Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday, and Merry Christmas to all you guys. I wanted to come on here and share that not just, but I did a breathwork session this morning with Devon, the Black Airbender, on IG. What an amazing experience I've had. It was so deep, it was so peaceful, it was still. I didn't want to get out of that state, but I was able to carry it, and I'm still carrying it now wherever I go, that stillness and that peace in the midst of all chaos with all the shopping that's going on. But what an amazing experience. So guys, check out his page and follow him, reach out to him, DM him if you guys are looking to do some breath work and you don't know how to go about it. He's a great guide into getting you into deep meditation. So go ahead and check him out, guys. Again, Merry Christmas. Have a safe holiday, and I love you guys all. Blessings. Peace.